One day in 1981, a 39-year-old Wall Street partner walked out of his office with a cardboard box and a $10 million severance check. Within a few years, the data machine he built with that payout would sit on almost every major trading desk and turn him into a man worth over $100 billion. This is the story of Michael Bloomberg, the engineer who turned being fired into an information empire that quietly runs global finance, and what it means when one man owns the screens everyone else depends on. If you care about how real money and influence are actually built, without motivational speeches or hero worship, subscribe. This channel breaks down the full, unpolished biographies of the people who move markets and cities step by step, with the uncomfortable details left in. Michael Bloomberg was born in 1942 in Boston's Brighton neighborhood, in a small apartment in a working-class part of town, into a middle-class Jewish family. His father, William, was a bookkeeper at a dairy company. His mother, Charlotte, taught in public schools. The family later moved to Medford, Massachusetts, where Michael and his two younger sisters grew up counting every dollar. Family income rarely broke a few thousand a year, and dinner table conversations were about bills, not business plans. Years later, he helped fund a new children's hospital tower and put his mother's name on it, not his own. On the Johns Hopkins campus in Baltimore, there is a 12-story children's hospital tower called the Charlotte R. Bloomberg Children's Center. Bloomberg funded it. Inside are intensive care units, operating rooms, and long hallways where parents wait to hear if their child will be okay. Numbers matter less here.
Just assured her and held her hand, and I said, I promise we were doing absolutely everything that we can for Sarah, and that if any place could save her, it was the Children's Center.
That was the real turning point for us.
The doctors are great, and look how I am now.
I am so grateful to all of them for giving me my girl back.
Remember this moment when you hear later about how he handled power. From early on, Michael tried to outplan the chaos around him. He joined the Boy Scouts and raced through the ranks, becoming an Eagle Scout by 12. Teachers remembered a kid who was quiet but relentless, the one who stayed after class to fix a lab gadget or double-check his math. By the time he graduated from Medford High in 1960, he had engineered his way into a different world, Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. There he studied electrical engineering, built the Blue Jay mascot costume by hand, and earned a reputation as the guy who could wire or repair almost anything. After Hopkins came Harvard Business School and an MBA in 1966, a rare combination of hard engineering and elite finance training. At this point, fresh out of Harvard with an engineering brain and no safety net, what do you think he did next? Took a safe corporate job, or walked straight into the riskiest corner of Wall Street? Drop your guess in the comments, and in under 2 minutes, you'll see which choice turned him into a billionaire. On paper, it looked like a straight, upward climb, but inside that modest Medford house, something else was happening that would leave a deeper scar than grades or college acceptances, and later push Bloomberg to treat every risk in life like a spreadsheet he had to control. That something else hit when he was 14. His father died suddenly, and the family's already thin safety net almost snapped. Money had always been tight in the Brighton and Medford years, but now every expense felt dangerous. Watching his mother stretch each paycheck, Bloomberg absorbed a blunt lesson. Security came from numbers that added up. Friends later said he began treating big decisions like balance sheets, listing assets, liabilities, worst-case scenarios. Engineering gave him tools to understand complex systems. Finance, he started to believe, could give him control over the parts of life that had once felt one bad accident away from collapse. That habit of turning fear into numbers would later help him build a global data empire and push him into some of the most controversial choices in New York City politics. Fresh out of Harvard in 1966, Bloomberg took an entry-level job at Salomon Brothers, a hard-driving Wall Street investment bank that paid him about $9,000 a year. Decent money, but nowhere near partner level. On his first rotation, senior partners sent him to the basement vault, rows of metal cabinets, stacks of paper stock and bond certificates, the air thick with dust and carbon paper. Billions of dollars of trades were recorded by hand, then phoned upstairs. Down there, Bloomberg could see exactly how slow and fragile the system was. While other juniors focused on getting to the trading floor, he volunteered for anything involving computers, data feeds, or pricing models, quietly positioning himself as the guy who understood both the numbers and the machines. For the young man who had watched his family scramble after his father's death, the vault wasn't just boring work. It was a reminder of how fragile fortunes could be when systems failed. If he could make those systems smarter and faster, he told himself, maybe fewer people would have to live with that kind of uncertainty. In 1978, senior executives tried to park him out of the way, shipping him off to an isolated IT role after he refused a transfer. They thought they were burying him. He treated it like a lab. Bloomberg turned the tech group into a small workshop for experiments, software that pulled bond prices in near real time onto glowing green screens. On the trading floor, they started calling him the engineer. Without quite realizing it, he was training himself to build the kind of data system that no single bank could contain. Very soon, that hidden expertise would become the foundation of a business no one else on Wall Street was prepared for. Then fate intervened. In 1981, Salomon Brothers was sold to Fibro, and the new owners abruptly told Bloomberg he was out. He walked away with about $10 million for his shares, a severance package worth many years of salary. For most people, that's the cue to slow down, buy a big house, and disappear from the grind. Bloomberg did the opposite. He kept the one thing he thought really mattered from Wall Street, his feel for numbers and probability. As one colleague put it, you never wanted him to lose at anything. Now he was staring at the biggest bet of his life. With cash in the bank and no job, would he play it safe? Or go all in on a new idea? That gamble paid off faster than he expected. The first year IMS landed several major clients. For example, Merrill Lynch installed a room full of terminals, and before long, the business took on a life of its own. By the mid-1980s, IMS was thriving, and in 1986, it formally became Bloomberg LP. Bloomberg, his own name on the company, was a declaration of confidence. By the early 1990s, his terminals were everywhere on Wall Street and beyond. A 1997 profile noted that Bloomberg's name was stamped on 73,000 computer terminals worldwide, feeding data to big banks and hedge funds from New York to Tokyo. The terminals became essential infrastructure. If you walked into any big trading floor in the late 90s, chances were a Bloomberg box was at the desk. Meanwhile, Bloomberg was quietly expanding. He added a news service, broadband data feeds, radio, and even his own cable news channel, all tailored to the information-hungry finance industry. By the end of the decade, Bloomberg LP was a diversified media company, but everything centered on that core idea. He controlled the stream of market information. Success made him rich, but it also made him uneasy about how much everything now depended on his network of screens. When markets moved, traders no longer barked orders across a room. They watched his terminals. Bloomberg liked the efficiency, but privately, he joked that if his system ever went down, half of Wall Street would start to panic. The line was half a joke, half a warning to himself about the responsibility he now carried. In just a few minutes, you will see what happens when that private data empire collides with public power in New York, and why one of his most data-driven decisions still shadows his legacy today. Bloomberg ran his company in his own image. He arrived at his midtown office in chinos and a work shirt, often late at night still in shorts. He worked extremely long hours and expected his senior team to do the same. He could be disarmingly informal, wandering the floor in sneakers, dropping by junior employees' desks, and then suddenly ruthless in meetings, cutting off rambling explanations with a flat, "That's stupid, do the math." People either adapted to his tempo or left. To some, he was the sharpest boss they'd ever had. To others, exhausting. Over the years, employees compiled a booklet of his sayings titled The Portable Bloomberg, Wit and Wisdom of Michael Bloomberg. The book contained many of his cutting one-liners. Some of those jokes were infamously crude. For example, he once quipped that if the Bloomberg terminal delivered oral sex, women might be out of jobs. And later, Bloomberg told reporters he regretted such disrespectful humor. He was not afraid to crack raw jokes at work, but in private he said he learned it was better to focus on the numbers. His motto was data. A longtime executive said, "Michael Bloomberg has always understood that information is power." Bloomberg firmly believed that owning data, controlling its flow, was the ultimate form of power. That insight guided every expansion, whether into media or technology. By the late 1990s, Bloomberg's fortune had soared alongside his business. He ranked among the richest people in New York, yet he remained a private individual in many respects, a contrast from the outgoing, larger-than-life moguls of old. He flew a personal jet and helicopter, lived simply, and competed in triathlons. He called himself Mike, even as his name adorned stadium signs and news broadcasts. Despite being known for astute financial moves, he never gave stock tips, preferring to roll profits back into new ventures. For years, he did not publicly express interest in politics. If anything, he made small forays, donating to causes, speaking to civic groups, quietly helping candidates. But in business, he felt more at home, being in control of a spreadsheet than dealing with elections. Still, change was on the horizon. Yet the distance between his private routine and the public size of his power was growing. He could run a triathlon on Sunday and walk into an office on Monday, where a typo in a data feed might shake global markets. The question of what responsibility came with that kind of leverage nagged at him more often, even as he told friends he had no interest in kissing babies or campaigning for votes. New York in the early 2000s was reeling from crisis. The city's government was seen as inefficient and budget-strapped after the 9/11 attacks. In 2001, a small circle of advisors and civic leaders began urging Bloomberg to run for mayor. Rudy Giuliani, the outgoing mayor, did not endorse anyone. He neither supported Bloomberg nor his main challenger. Bloomberg hesitated. He was 59, had never held public office, and knew almost nothing about retail politics. Walking away from his company, even temporarily, meant handing over the machine he'd spent 2 decades building. Friends remember him running the decision like a spreadsheet, columns of pros and cons, questions about whether he could actually make the bureaucracy behave the way a data dashboard did. In October 2001, after weeks of wrestling with the idea, he announced his campaign. He ran as a Republican, switching from Democrat, presenting himself as a centrist problem solver who would balance budgets and fix schools with a technocratic touch. He believed the numbers were on his side. What he was about to discover was how stubborn a city could be when those numbers ran into real lives and neighborhoods. The campaign was unconventional. Bloomberg literally financed it himself. Even before the first primary vote, he had spent tens of millions, far more than any other candidate, on ads, flyers, and staff. His ads were crisp, without the usual partisan labels. They stressed his management style, showed him with hard hats at construction sites, or crunching numbers on spreadsheets. Then September 11th happened. Bloomberg paused his run to help. For days he worked alongside Giuliani, coordinating private relief. He donated tens of millions in free advertising and communications equipment to aid recovery teams. When he re-entered the race after Ground Zero smoke cleared, he did so as a man who had helped the city survive catastrophe. That helped his image immensely. When the votes came in on November 6, 2001, Michael Bloomberg won the mayor's office by a clear margin. By January 1, 2002, the data guy was Mayor Bloomberg, the 108th mayor of New York City. At his inauguration on that cold winter day, there were no promises of grand ideology. He simply said, "I'm Mike Bloomberg and I live in this city," implying he would manage it as one of his own homes. Then he got to work. As mayor, Bloomberg tried to run New York the way he'd run a trading floor. One of his first moves was to rip out the old City Hall layout. The mayor's suite turned into an open bullpen. Rows of desks, computer monitors glowing, phones ringing, everyone in one room. Police brass, sanitation bosses, health officials, all sitting a few meters apart. Bloomberg parked himself at a regular desk in the middle, no corner office, no heavy doors to close. For a while, the metrics seemed to tell a simple story of progress, until one set of statistics, crime, pushed his faith in data into dangerous territory. On camera, it looked almost like a Wall Street shop transplanted into government. If crime numbers or trash complaints spiked, someone's screen would light up, and Bloomberg could swivel his chair and demand an answer right there. For him, the room was a living dashboard, everything visible, nobody able to hide for long. Then he went after the city's budget. New York was deep in deficit, and Bloomberg attacked it like a spreadsheet problem. He sat in long meetings, circling line items, pushing commissioners to justify every dollar. Within a few years, the city moved from red ink to surpluses, helped by higher taxes on Wall Street bonuses and cuts to wasteful programs. On TV, he sounded less like a politician and more like a CFO, rattling off revenue numbers and deficit projections from memory. The same logic crept into policy. HIV programs came with dashboards and targets, school principals got bonuses or pressure based on test scores, and computer labs spread through classrooms like new terminals on a trading floor. Bloomberg's initiative on public health also bore his signature. He enacted a citywide smoking ban in restaurants and bars in 2003, a move he had tentatively tried as a private citizen in his own restaurants. Then, in 2006, he banned trans fats from eateries, citing a City Hall study that few New Yorkers should ingest the stuff at all. When Subway, a national chain, sued the city over calorie posting, another Bloomberg policy, Bloomberg simply double-checked their math and pointed to the state health code that required the counts. He wanted citizens to see facts. Calories in a Big Mac were now just printed on the menu. Despite the techno-optimism, Bloomberg learned limits. Crime, for instance, he tried to cut using data. His NYPD commissioner instituted a computer tracking system to deploy officers to high-crime areas. Crime rates did decline, and Bloomberg took credit, but that came with controversy. Under his watch, the NYPD expanded its stop and frisk stops dramatically to nearly 500,000 stops by 2010. To Bloomberg, it was a numbers-driven policy. Stop more people, catch more guns. In meetings, he would point to charts of murders and argue the math was on his side. The human dimension was different. Critics noted that the majority of stops were of Black and Latino youth, and violent crime was concentrated in their communities. Some of his own staff warned that the policy was eroding trust in whole neighborhoods. In 2013, a federal judge found the city's application of stop and frisk unconstitutional. When confronted with those findings, Bloomberg at first defended the policy as life-saving. He only apologized years later, saying he regretted its impact. The episode became one of the clearest failures of his data-first instinct. The spreadsheet said one thing, but the people living under the policy felt another. Another test of Bloomberg's influence was political itself. In 2008, after 2 terms, he argued the city couldn't afford to lose continuity. Privately, he also knew he wasn't finished with his agenda. He quietly pushed the city council to extend mayoral term limits, allowing him to run again. His advisors brought in poll numbers showing strong support for his leadership. Opponents decried the move as self-serving. Even some allies worried it would stain his legacy. The council voted to grant him a 3rd term in a midnight session that critics derided as undemocratic. Bloomberg campaigned once more in 2009 with the familiar formula. He self-funded it, $78 million, and cast himself as the experienced, safe choice. It was a cliffhanger in slow motion. Election night results came down to a few percentage points. In the end, Bloomberg narrowly won again. Voters had granted him an extra term, but the bruising debate over term limits made clear that the line between effective management and personal power had blurred. Bloomberg's final years as mayor were about execution. He had won re-election and had no fresh campaign. He could focus on projects. He spearheaded Plan YC 2030, a climate and land use plan that aimed to track the city's carbon footprint and infrastructure needs. He expanded bike lanes across Manhattan and Brooklyn. He pushed digitization, for example, launching a city website where anyone could view weekly stats on crime and inspections. And he waged cultural fights. He challenged state and federal smoking rights, sometimes flooding judges with data on health trends, other times quietly dropping cases if political winds turned. He made New York more modern and data-savvy, even if he sometimes seemed like a CEO in a mayor's chair. By 2014, Bloomberg had achieved most of his mayoral goals, but left with mixed legacy. He had balanced the budget and boosted many indicators, but at what cost? His opposition to tobacco and trans fats had drawn national admiration and lawsuits, his crime policies judicial rebuke. The city was objectively safer and richer, but Bloomberg's critics warned that it had become a surveillance society. Bloomberg himself, however, just closed one door. When he left, he gave a speech about the next generation of leaders having to build on progress, not unlike a CEO handing off his business. Outside City Hall, he would try to answer that question not with speeches, but with money and data on a global scale. Away from the microphones, friends say he was proudest of the city's fiscal turnaround and its drop in crime, and most stung by the way stop and frisk came to define him for many New Yorkers. For a man used to measuring success in clear metrics, it was unsettling to realize that his years in office could not be reduced to one clean chart. The question of whether he had pushed too far, or not far enough, lingered as he stepped back into private life. Out of government, Bloomberg devoted himself to his vast fortune and philanthropic projects. He rejoined his company as CEO in late 2014. Bloomberg LP had grown into a giant. By that time, it had tens of thousands of staff across dozens of offices, serving hundreds of thousands of clients worldwide. As CEO again, Bloomberg oversaw further tech upgrades. He moved company operations onto modern cloud infrastructure and prepared it to handle the data explosion of the internet age. By 2025, The terminal was even adding artificial intelligence. The company announced AI tools to read and summarize news and trends for clients. Bloomberg's firm, once a lone black box on the trading floor, was embracing machine learning, a quiet revolution in how data was served to traders. In his mind, he had long seen this coming. He had said years before that machine learning would one day track patterns he could not. Even more visible was Bloomberg's emergence as a philanthropist on an epic scale. With a net worth over $100 billion, he could afford broad strokes. He signed the Giving Pledge, vowing to donate most of his wealth. Through Bloomberg Philanthropies, he financed dozens of causes. He gave hundreds of millions to fight climate change, global public health, and gun violence. In 2021, he personally donated $150 million to Harvard University to establish a Bloomberg Center for Cities, aimed at training future mayors and urban leaders. He offered large grants to the World Health Organization for tobacco reduction campaigns. In New York, he quietly funded the Memorial Museum at Ground Zero, eventually raising $450 million for it and putting in $50 million himself. He even launched a non-profit to make cities smarter. Since 2009, he has directed roughly $350 million toward data-driven city projects. These acts were in the same spirit as his mayoral style: solve problems by injecting capital where it would do the most measurable good. There was also a personal calculus at work. Colleagues noticed that as criticism of his policing policies and third term grew louder, his giving on public health, education, and cities accelerated. Bloomberg never framed it as atonement, but the pattern was hard to miss. The same drive that had once pushed him to optimize a trading floor was now directed at trying to tilt large systems, healthcare, climate, gun laws, toward what he considered better outcomes. Yet even that was not the final arena he chose. There was still one office where pure data and wealth had never carried him. Notably, Bloomberg never stopped playing in politics, even if it was mostly with money and ideas. In late 2019, he made headlines by entering the Democratic presidential primary. He was 77 at the time, and the race was packed. Bloomberg's strategy was classic Bloomberg: self-fund to break through early. He launched millions of dollars in ads across dozens of states. For a few weeks it worked. He won big in a few contests on Super Tuesday, cruising to tens of delegates. But under the debate lights, his boardroom style fell flat. Rivals attacked his record on stop and frisk and his use of wealth in politics, and he struggled to answer in the compressed, emotional language of national campaigns. Within weeks, his polling sank, and his bid fizzled. He bowed out and endorsed Joe Biden. For perhaps the first time on a global stage, the man who trusted data more than anything learned that there were problems, like persuading millions of skeptical voters, that could not be solved with money, metrics, or clever targeting alone. Today, Bloomberg remains an influential figure. He splits his time between Manhattan and a farm upstate. He is not as publicly visible as a sitting mayor, but he still convenes leaders. In January 2024, he was part of a group that bought the Baltimore Orioles baseball team, an unconventional investment for a former politician. He sits on boards of causes and thinks tanks. He rarely gives big speeches, but when he does, he often sounds like a CEO reviewing quarterly results, pointing to data sets rather than grand platitudes. He attends global economic forums and climate summits, speaking in measured terms about risk and return on societal investments. Friends say he relaxes by reading briefing books and city reports the way others read novels. He has a small circle of longtime companions and colleagues, but little interest in nostalgia. Conversations with him tend to drift back to the next project, the next chart. The private man and the public symbol of data-driven power have by now largely merged. Above all, he stays engaged with the same tools he always did. It is said he still checks the Bloomberg terminal each morning, reviewing markets by code with the same curiosity of a young programmer debugging a model. At 81, Michael Bloomberg's legacy is concrete and global. The trading floors of Wall Street still buzz with Bloomberg terminals. By the late 2020s, hundreds of thousands of professionals rely on them every day. More quietly, city governments from Seoul to São Paulo still run analytics software that his initiatives helped start. The programs he funded are tested in outcomes reports, their effectiveness debated in city council chambers. If there is an image to close on, imagine New York at dawn. The skyline lights a new day, stock tickers scrolling endlessly, and somewhere inside Bloomberg's empire, an algorithm is trading, or a policy wonk is decoding data. The man who long ago said, "In God we trust, everyone else, bring data," is still at the center of it all, the master of that data, for better or worse. In the late 2020s, his life is proof that controlling information can indeed be the source of great power. The infrastructures of money and governance he helped build still hum with energy, and Bloomberg, ever the engineer, watches them run. If you want more deep dives into the people who quietly move the levers of finance and politics, subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode.